Hi, this is Jim Mann with Home South Southern Cooking. So nice to be back with you again today. Today I'm going to bring you a recipe that has long been forgotten. Some of you might remember it, but I bet the great many of you will not. It's a tomato soup cake. Now this was a cake they made back in the 40s and 50s, and it was really popular during the Depression. And my grandmother used to make it occasionally. I remember the first time that I went to her house as a young boy for Sunday dinner. I used to love to go to her house because she always had a wonderful fried chicken and all the stuff you're not supposed to have, but she always had the most wonderful pies and cakes, and I've told you all about that a million times. Well, the one Sunday I go to her house and I said, Grandma, what's for dessert today? Because I was more concerned for dessert than dinner. And she said, we're going to have a tomato soup cake. And my face just dropped. And I said, a tomato soup cake? I said, I don't want any, because I didn't like tomatoes back then. So she put her hand on her hip and she said, well, I guess if I had made you an apple cake or a cherry cake or something like that, you'd have eaten it. Some sort of fruit cake, you'd have eaten it. And I said, yes. I said, but I don't want no tomato soup cake. At which time she grabbed me by the hand, took me to the room, and at that time we didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. So she took the encyclopedia off the wall. We opened it up, at what point she showed me that tomatoes were not a vegetable, they were a fruit. So she had me, so she made me try it. I had one bite and I was sold from then on. So every time she had it from then on, I absolutely loved it. So I wanted to share that with you, so if you make it for your family and they say, oh, we don't want a vegetable pie, I say, well, you're not eating a vegetable pie, you're eating a fruit pie. So, because tomatoes is technically a fruit. All right, let's start this off. I've got a cup and a stick and a half of softened butter. And this butter was very, very hard about 3 minutes ago. If you take any type of bowl or something and put it in the microwave for like 30 seconds and put it over top of your butter just where you use it, it makes it real soft, okay? So we're going to put that in there. To that, I'm going to add 1 cup of sugar. And to the 1 cup of sugar, I'm going to add 1 medium to large egg. And we'll put those all here in my mixer here. And we'll cream these up. There are so many recipes that we have forgotten that are really good over time, and things like, you know, when I brought you the meatloaf recipes, families don't do meatloafs anymore. So there are a lot of things that we have forgotten that are really, really good. So I'm hoping by doing some of these, it'll bring back maybe new traditions for your family. Okay, I've got that all creamed up in here now, as you can see. It's nice and creamy in there. So what I'm going to add next is I've got 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Put 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda in here. I have got 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I have 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. I have 1 teaspoon of ground cloves. And I have 1 teaspoon of allspice. So I'll put those on, then I'm going to mix those up a little bit. Okay, this is blended together pretty well. Next is what I'm going to add is I've got my can of cream of tomato soup, 1 can of cream of tomato soup. I'm going to put the whole can of cream of tomato soup in there. I want to scrape out as much of this as I can get out of here. And I promise you, if you try this, you'll love it. It's a very unique, different taste that I think you will come to love. All right, I'm going to mix this up a little bit. Okay, now, the last thing we'll add to this is my flour. I've got all-purpose flour here. And let me see what, I forgot the recipe. The recipe says, I've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. So this is 1. Deep down in the deep, I have to refill my flour container here. This is 2. And then I got my little half right here. So I got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. It's a very simple cake to make, as you've seen already. I mean, it's just putting things together and blending them. We'll turn this on low for us so we don't have a dust storm here. Okay, this is blended together pretty well. So now, the last 2 ingredients we're going to add is I've got 1 cup of chopped walnuts. I'll put the walnuts in there. And then I've got 1 cup of yellow raisins. Now, if you do not have yellow raisins, you can use regular raisins also. But it was tradition they use the yellow raisins, so that's what I'm having. That's what I'm using. So I'm using a cup of chopped walnuts and a cup of the yellow raisins. Then I'm gonna mix these all together. Look at that, how pretty that looks. Okay, I've got those all stirred up. And I'm going to take my pan here and I'm going to spray it pretty good with the spray that has the flour already in it. Make sure I grab the sides really good, make sure you're really good. And then as I always do, I cut a piece of parchment paper for the bottom. And then I like to respray that also, because if it's going to stick, usually it sticks on the bottom. And the parchment paper makes it so much easier to come out. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to take my mixture here. My oven's set on 350 degrees. And it should be going off, but it already went off. And we'll fold in my batter into my pan. Now, if you want to take some extra raisins or some walnuts and put it on the top of this, you can. But what we're going to do today is we're going to make it the traditional way. It had a topping to it, and we're going to actually make the topping that went on it also. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way that we served it 50, 60, 70 years ago. I want to get this pressed down all my corners. Make sure this is all well pressed down here. Okay, I'm going to put this in my oven now for about 35 minutes, and when it's finished cooking, I'll come back to you. Our tomato cake soup came out of the oven and it's cooled down, and it is absolutely beautiful. It was in there about 40, 45 minutes instead of 35 minutes. I always talk about you go by the recipe, but I have a cake test, but you can use a toothpick. The best way to check is to put a toothpick in the middle to see if it comes out clean. And it did, so I knew it was ready. So it was in there between 40 and 45 minutes. So I'm gonna set this to the side just for a second. And I'm gonna bring in a bowl. I'm gonna bring in my powdered sugar. We're gonna make an icing for the top of this. I'm going to start off, I've got a half a stick of softened butter. I'll put my half a stick of softened butter in my bowl. I've got a half a stick of Philadelphia cream cheese that has been softening also. Put that in my bowl. And I've got 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm going to put that in my bowl. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take these and I'm just going to beat these up a little bit. We'll set this aside just for a second. And I'm going to start adding powdered sugar. Now, the powdered sugar, I'm going to eye it to see how much I need. I'm going to start off with 1 cup. And I'm going to mix this around to see how thick that gets the icing. Because it doesn't take a lot to make the powdered sugar soften up again. All right, see, that's still a little bit runny, so I'm going to put about another ½ cup of powdered sugar in here. Okay, I've got this nice and creamy. I actually used about 2 cups of powdered sugar in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this over here and I'm going to take some of my icing, put it right on top of my tomato soup cake. This has got cream cheese and butter in there, and I'm going to take this and I'm just going to spread this across the top of it. Well, this smells like Christmas, okay? So if you have this, make this in your house. I know why her house always smelled like Christmas, because she was always baking and always doing something. And I guess when you use cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg all the time, you know, use those spices, it's going to smell like Christmas time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to run this around the top of it. I'm not going to cover the sides. I'm going to leave the sides open. I'll make sure I get all around to the edge here. Smooth it off. Now, if you really wanted to take this somewhere, if you wanted to sprinkle some walnuts on top of this, you could, okay? All right, there's our cake. Give me 1 second. Okay, I had to go get me a plate because I wanted to cut this in front of y'all so y'all could see it. And it's been a number of years since I've had this, but I used to have it on a regular basis when I was growing up. And there it is. There is your tomato soup cake with the icing on it. And now the true test. I've forgotten how good that is. You would not have a clue that that was a can of tomato soup that made this cake. That cake is rich with the frosting on it, with the cream cheese, the currants. I tasted the currants. All the spices come through. This is one great cake for the holidays coming up or any time of year. Wow, that is really good. I know you hear me say this, but this is a keeper. You need to try this one. Thank you so much for following me on Facebook and subscribing to me on YouTube. I appreciate your support. Y'all are there for me all the time, and I really appreciate it. I send each one of you a great big hug and let you know that I'm thinking about you. I can't wait to finish this cake. Try this cake. Wow, it is really, really good. I can't impress upon you how really good it is. Until next time, this is Jim in Mexico saying, give yourselves a great big hug, and God bless.